Hello, everyone. I'm Nehemiah Frank, founder and editor-in-chief of the Black Wall Street Times, aka Neo, and I am sitting here with Victor Luckerson, the author of Built from the Fire. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Neo. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So, Built from the Fire, what is the premise of this book?
So really, this is the story of Greenwood, not just the race massacre, which so many people know about, but the history of this community over the course of more than 100 years. I'm a journalist. I've been a journalist, professional journalist for the last 10 years. And I always had a passion for telling stories about Black history, about Black folks. And, I learned about the race massacre several years ago. That's kind of my first knowledge about Greenwood. But I really wanted to be able to tell a story about this place that went beyond just those 2 days. So I moved here in 2019 to work on this project. I've been living in Tulsa, just west of Greenwood, for more than 3 years. Meeting folks here, met dozens of folks here and in other places who are from this community. Really want to be able to just tell this story and capture a narrative about this place that went beyond just the race massacre. So Built from the Fire, the tagline is 100 years in the neighborhood that refused to be erased. So it's really just about the resilience this place has shown, not only then, but ever since then, really.
So you follow the Goodwin family throughout the book. Can you tell me a little bit about that experience?
Yeah.
Like, what was interesting about the Goodwin family?
Of course.
They're not originally from here.
Right. So the Goodwin family, like many, came to Greenwood before the race massacre. They came from Jim Crow, Mississippi, 1913. And it was really interesting meeting them. My entry point to that family was actually Regina Goodwin, the state representative for Greenwood. I met her 5 years ago on the anniversary of the race massacre. We were at the Greenwood Cultural Center. I was meeting all kinds of different folks, and then my first time visiting Greenwood. And we were in there, and she showed me this photo of a man, very dapper looking man, staying in a haberdashery, 1930s, like great clothes all around him. He looks fresh. And she's like, oh, this is my grandfather, Ed Goodwin Sr. And so that's how I kind of realized they had this legacy in this community that really stretches all the way back. They survived the race massacre. They ultimately ended up buying the Oklahoma Eagle, the Black newspaper that we still have here in Greenwood. Regina is a legislator today representing the community. And so I realized that by following this one family, I could follow journalists, academics, activists, lawyers, all these different roles that play such an important part of making a community whole. They kind of had that just with that one family. Obviously, the book follows lots of other families are talked about in the book,
right.
But having an anchor point that the reader could have a touchstone for at every step was really important to me. And so working with them was a pleasure for sure.
What was something that you discovered that you didn't expect?
Man, there was so much. I can tell you, the hardest thing that I found was I found a lot of really traumatic information but inside of very mundane documents. That was a really interesting part of the research. And so I found these facts that I would just be in the library, just poring over stuff, and a lot of it's really tedious work. But then you find something that really jolts you, you know? So, I was digging through the Red Cross reports. After the race massacre, the Red Cross was one of the only organizations that really sort of tried to do right by Greenwood and help folks, This man, Maurice Willows, who was a Red Cross director, came to Tulsa and came to Greenwood and was actually a really active and positive force for the community. And they left a really detailed report about what happened. That number that we all know about, 1,256 homes that were destroyed during the race massacre, that comes from the Red Cross report. So they have all these statistics about what happened during the race massacre, the number of homes destroyed, number of people fed afterwards and relief efforts. And they also have some information about injuries and fatalities. And in this document that I was reading, they had this statistic about 8 stillborn babies.
Whoa.
And so that was something I just found one day, at the library, and I really had to sit with that, So that was an example of something that's in the book, that information. And so that was something that I found that I didn't know from learning about the massacre in other books or Watchmen or whatever. And that really stuck with me because it just explained how much this community's future was taken from it, by the white mob and by the folks who did that. So that was definitely the thing that surprised me the most. That's really stuck with me, I would say.
Wow. So as a Black journalist and a Black researcher, the work can be emotional, right?
Yeah.
Because you're proximate. How do you deal with that when you're writing about Black trauma?
It's tough, man, because that information about the babies, that was hard to sit with. Still is. I mean, one thing I would say is that for me, sometimes accessing my more creative side makes it easier to process. And my book is very academically rigorous, but also hopefully feels creative and novelistic in some sense, like you're reading a story. And so actually when I wrote The Race Massacre, there's 2 chapters in the book that kind of capture May 31st and June 1st of the actual race massacre. And when I wrote those 2 chapters, I usually like type everything out and, online, the way we all write, these days. But for those 2 chapters, actually, I went up on Standpipe Hill, which is where a machine gun was set, and fired down on Greenwood during the race massacre. So I went up there and I had a moleskin notebook and I wrote the whole thing by hand.
Whoa.
Which I haven't written anything by hand like that since I was in high school, probably. And so, I don't know. So I think somehow doing that in that space helped me process it more. So I think both I was able to access something deeper in what I wrote, but also I think maybe being more in tune with it made it a little bit easier to process than if I had the complete normal journalistic remove from it. So, that's something I did. And then beyond that, I think I'm still processing it. During my research, I found, again, at the library, Oklahoma State Tulsa Library, they have a recording of this ceremony that happened at Mount Zion on the 50th anniversary of the race massacre. So in Mount Zion in 1971, a lot of very prominent massacre survivors, Mabel Little, W.D. Williams, Ed Gilman Sr., a lot of these folks, they had this ceremony to commemorate the 50th anniversary. It was really one of the first big public events acknowledging what happened, in an era when that was still something that you could be threatened for in Tulsa. And in this ceremony, they have this choir, the Mount Zion Choir. They sing "Lift Every Voice and Sing" at the ceremony, and I gotta play it for you at some point because when you hear that, man, it brought tears to my eyes. It still does every time. Wow. And so I think for me, sometimes I absorb all this information all the time, and then it comes out in very cathartic moments like that. So for me, it kind of wells up, and then something has a release like that, So that, I don't know if that's the healthiest approach to it, but that's just how I've processed all this information the last few years.
Wow. So. What do you hope that people take away from reading Built from the Fire?
I mean, there's a few things. I think one thing was really important to me was, let's walk through mechanically every moment in which the city of Tulsa failed to do right by Greenwood.
Yeah.
So for example, during the race massacre chapters of the book, I actually walked through very specifically every police action that was taken and all the decisions the police made to not protect Greenwood, as well as the National Guard. Then after the race massacre, you can walk through all the decisions the city made, city council and other entities, trying to conduct a land grab of the community. And we go on, with redlining, urban renewal, etc. So I think that just having all that stuff documented, footnoted, in a way that's accessible to people is really important. So that's sort of the academic side of it, which I think is really important. And then sort of on the more creative side, I think it's really important to just represent Black folks as they live. A lot of times we're reduced to symbols. Our trauma is what's sort of put on a pedestal a lot of times in popular culture. I think it's happened in some capacity with the massacre itself. And so, writing a story in which Black folks are just living in Greenwood, during early Greenwood, before the race massacre, afterwards when they were going to the bars and nightlife and having fun, when we all celebrated Juneteenth together a couple years ago, having those moments in which Black people are not sort of in this battle with white supremacy as sort of the overarching narrative of our purpose in this country.
Yeah.
That was really important to me to display in this book. And I had to make sure that as I wrote it, that stayed at the forefront, So I think it's gonna be interesting to see what Black readers and white readers take from it. And even already so far, I've kind of noticed white readers are all about the race massacre. That's what they came for,
Yeah.
And so it'd be interesting for me to see what different kind of folks take from this book.
Wow. So you mentioned the book was academically rigorous, right? It's 500 pages. Did you intend for the book to be 500 pages long, or
no? That definitely wasn't.
How did that happen?
No,
Okay.
It really wasn't. I remember. So one of my biggest influences for writing this was The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson, a book about the Great Migration, and she kind of similar. She follows these families across decades and decades. I remember I got that book and I read it. It was a fantastic book. I was like, man, that was a long book. I was like, I could never write a book this long. And then if you look at it now, it's basically almost as long as her book. But I think first of all for me is I had to be able to capture everything in depth. That was really important to me. And then also, I just honestly got really excited about some things I discovered. Like I have a whole section in this book about nightlife in Greenwood, the 1950s, because the Eagle had a nightlife section of the newspaper. So you just had, there's just so much information about like Bo Diddley, B.B. King, Etta James, these icons coming through Tulsa, and I was, this has to be in the book. So it got along sometimes just 'cause I got a little excited about some stuff like that. But also, like I said, to have both the academic rigor of the challenges Black folks face, but also to celebrate their humanity, to include all that in one story just takes a lot of time, you know what I mean? So.
Yeah. So in a world where, in America, where we're having extreme political polarization, you see book bans taking place everywhere. Do you think this book is going to be banned from high schoolers?
I don't know. I mean, so the modern section of the book, what's gonna be funny if it gets banned is the modern section of the book engaged with that very directly. Because like I said, I actually spent a lot of time shadowing Representative Goodwin in the State House. So I sort of observed this backlash that's unfolding. I was kind of watching it happen from the State House in a lot of ways.
Wow.
So, you know, it certainly fits the criteria of what a lot of conservatives are challenging right now, you know, because it's putting Black people and Black stories at the center of the narrative, and saying very plainly the ways in which Tulsa and Oklahoma failed them over time.
Yeah.
So, you know, will it get banned? I don't know. That wouldn't shock me, but there is kind of a meta layer to it because the book itself is engaging with the books that are already being banned right now. So we'll see. I don't know. Can't predict the future.
So
okay.
Do you see this being required reading for high schoolers?
I think it would be a valuable addition. I mean, the book captures the story of Booker T just as an example. I have a chapter in this book about Booker T when it moved from Greenwood to the current location.
Yeah.
And I interviewed folks who are now in their 80s who remember that, you know what I mean? So I think it would be really valuable for students in Tulsa in particular to learn that history, you know what I mean? Now, will it happen? You know, I don't know. There's so many forces now that even for the folks who want to assign it, you know, they have to worry about their jobs to assign a book like this. So, you know, will that happen? That's what I'm saying. It's hard to predict. And I don't want to, you know, I don't want to antagonize somebody or whatever. Or it's just hard to, I don't know enough about the politics of how it's going to play out. But I do know that it's a tragedy that even a teacher who wants to sign this book might fear for their jobs by signing it. That's super messed up, and that's the world we live in right now in Oklahoma. So, you know.
Cool. Well, Victor, thank you so much for sitting with us, bro. I'm extremely proud of your book. This book comes out May 23rd. You can buy it here, or you can pre-order it online right now on Amazon. And where else can we get it?
You can also get it at Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Fulton Street Books, wherever you want to get the book, it's going to be there. So
cool. Thank you, brother.
Oh yeah, thank you.